Welcome back. Thank you very much for staying with us. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy will travel to South Africa next month to discuss efforts to end Russia's war on Ukraine. Ramaphosa has held a firm stance aimed at bringing an end to the war. Ramaphosa led an initiative as 6 African nations a while back to help end the conflict, but it failed to yield any results. For more on this, we speak to SABC News International Editor Sophie Mokoena. Good evening, Sophie. Thank you very much for joining us as always. So the presidency has confirmed Volodymyr Zelensky's state visit is scheduled for the 10th of April. And it, of course, comes on the back of an explosive meeting with Donald Trump and then a very warm reception that we saw at the EU summit. Just talk us through what is expected to feature prominently at the talk between the two presidents, that's President Ramaphosa and President Zelenskyy.
The two leaders will be discussing the relationship between the two countries, and this will be the first state visit by the sitting president of Ukraine. And therefore, I think they would want to look at the relationship between South Africa and Ukraine. As you know that during the Soviet Union, Ukraine was part of Russia. This was a situation where you had these two nations working together and being one. And you'd remember that during that time, during the struggle, many liberation fighters got military or received military training, both in Ukraine and also in Russia under the Soviet Union. And therefore, I think they will look at that relationship. And today, how can the relationship between Ukraine and South Africa be strengthened? But of interest will be the discussions around the war in Ukraine. As you know that when it started, Ukraine was aggrieved that South Africa has strong ties with Moscow, not Kyiv. And they were lamenting the fact that during Soviet Union, both Kyiv and also Moscow had a relationship with the governing party at that time when the war started, the ANC. And therefore didn't understand or made accusations that it looks like the ANC is taking sides under the ANC-led government at that time. But the president pointed out that South Africa is non-aligned. Even the minister at that time, Naledi Pandor, kept emphasizing that. And then we saw that tour to, or that visit, the peace mission to Kyiv and also to Moscow. And I think those negotiations will continue. But let's take a listen at what the ambassador of Ukraine had to say about the coming visit by President Zelenskyy. And of course, the president's spokesperson that I engaged earlier on this visit, or the much talked about state visit of President Zelenskyy to South Africa next month. Let's listen in.
President Zelenskyy is scheduled to come with a visit to South Africa in April. The purpose is the enhancement of political dialogue. This will be the first visit of Ukrainian president to South Africa since the re-establishment of Ukraine's independence. We are looking forward for launching of the bilateral, multi-sectoral dialogue and cooperations. We yet have to discuss what the composition of delegation will be, but we're pretty much sure that it will reflect the goals of South African presidency in G20.
Visit by President Zelenskyy to South Africa is a culmination of a number of engagements that President Ramaphosa has held with both President Zelenskyy as well as President Putin. And when President Zelenskyy is here, they will continue discussing the beginning of what we would like to see as a peace process that will set the two warring parties in that conflict on a road to peace. You will recall that President Ramaphosa was part of an African initiative, which we call the African Peace Initiative, that went to Ukraine and to Russia and engaged both heads of states on a need for dialogue as the only path to achieve a lasting peace. Finally, we are delighted, I suppose, to see a number of countries beginning to rally around a point that as South Africa we made at the onset of this conflict, that this is not a war that either party will ever win. This is a conflict that requires all parties involved to sit around the table and work towards a negotiated and peaceful resolution to this conflict. There's been alignment between President Ramaphosa and President Putin on the need for a dialogue. President Ramaphosa recently met with Minister Lavrov during the G20 Foreign Ministers Summit, and the President did inform Minister Lavrov that he has invited President Zelenskyy to come to South Africa as part of the ongoing engagements or the continuation of discussions to eventually get the parties to talk about peace and about stability in that part of the world. President will be reaching out to President Putin once more, and they're in constant communication, but he will be reaching out prior to President Zelenskyy to once again affirm that alignment that it will take commitment to a peaceful resolution of that conflict to set the two countries on a lasting peace.
Very interesting, their interaction with the presidency spokesperson, Sophie. But then again now we're seeing another shift globally where Donald Trump, having been somebody who seemed to enjoy or at least have been sympathetic to the plight of Russia or having heard their cause. Now it seems he's threatening sanctions to Russia, saying that the two countries, Ukraine and Russia, must quickly resolve this matter. But beyond that, there could be new sanctions towards Russia.
A transitional president, you can't predict Donald Trump. This is what he's saying now. And I think we are still waiting to hear what President Vladimir Putin will say in terms of the response, because I think Moscow will respond. But those are the latest development. He is now threatening Russia with sanctions. And therefore, you can see that sometimes to really rely on President Trump can be very dangerous, because you don't know the next day what is he going to say. And this is exactly what happened today, him saying that Russia's continuation in terms of pumping on Kyiv and also parts of Ukraine is going to push America to impose sanctions in relation to the financial institutions in that country. And therefore, this is something that is happening now. And therefore now almost about 10, when a few days ago he was adamant that President Vladimir Putin is a reliable person.
So it's clearly based on the continuation of the bombardment of Ukraine. And then back in South Africa now, we also saw a social media post from Donald Trump. And he's saying that now he's no longer just offering refugee status to farmers in South Africa, but citizenship. Talk to us about that.
How many farmers will leave South Africa, particularly the Afrikaner community, where they are able to practice their language, their culture, even though there are challenges in terms of their expectations in relation to what they have been complaining about in relation to the laws that are aimed at redressing the imbalance of the past. How many will leave South Africa and go to America? Only a few days ago, we saw that the official language now in America, it's English. Will they be able to exercise their culture, their language, and will they get support in terms of institutions that will allow them to do those things? And therefore, the question is, will the farmers, particularly the Afrikaner community, decide to relocate to America? We've had AfriForum and also Solidarity saying that that's something that they are not going to do, much as they want support from Donald Trump. And again, he has decided to wake up and talk about South Africa And that is why many people are saying perhaps those around him, they are not really giving him information and proper information so that whatever he puts in the public domain really looks presidential. In most cases, what he says doesn't look presidential. We saw with the tariffs, the next day he had to walk back. That's an embarrassment.
On the tariffs on Mexico and Canada. But Sophie, what does this then mean? Because it's quite important that we're seeing this post straight on the back of the Democratic Alliance concluding their visit to the United States. They said they spoke to key people within Congress, so one would think that they have the ear of the president. But post that, when you look at this level of negativity in that post, you realize that whatever was stated went from one ear to the other, because it doesn't sound as though anything positive was said to him if you look at that post.
Who did they engage in the United States of America? Because clearly, when you look at President Trump's message now, it looks like the issue of DA pushing that the AGOA renewal must happen. It's not going to happen. And I've heard from reliable source that South Africa is not relaxing right now. It's working hard to revive trade relations with some of the old trading partners. But secondly, preparing that there's a possibility that AGOA will not be renewed, and therefore look for alternative markets and look for a better trade relation at bilateral level with America, because you have more than 500 American companies in South Africa. The same with South African companies. They are doing business with Americans, and therefore it's a two-way trade relations, much as AGOA was a cherry on top. But I think now South Africa is saying we can't rest. Let's see what's going to happen on Thursday. A high-powered delegation of the European Union will be in Cape Town. The president will be hosting the European Union leadership. And I think we are going to see strengthening of trade and political relations with the European Union, the bloc that was the most powerful bloc in terms of our trade relations with countries around the world.
Sophie, thank you very much, as always, for that reportage. I'm sure if anybody was uncertain as to how that meeting with those officials in the United States went, if you just look at the post by Donald Trump, you'd say it probably didn't go so well. But thank you very much, as always, for joining us. That's SABC News International Editor Sophie Mokoena, just talking to us on all the global developments.